everybody, I'm Kate Cass, and welcome to our edition of Let's Talk About. Today, let's talk about Back to the Future. Back in July, I attended an event called Broadway Con, which, if you don't know, is exactly what it sounds like. I was at the con for the whole weekend, and like any theater lover spending 3 days and 2 nights in New York City, I wanted to see some shows while I was there. And one that was at the top of my list was Back to the Future, the musical. I don't talk about this franchise all that much, mainly because it doesn't come up, but Back to the Future is peak, and I adore it. Hot take, I know. It was number 8 in my top 10 favorite movies video a while back, and I even put together a small tribute for the 30th anniversary. I don't recommend watching it. It was one of the earliest Let's Talk About videos I put together in like 2 hours in haste. I don't even know why I told you it existed. Since I'm such a big fan of the franchise, as soon as Back to the Future came to Broadway, I knew I had to go. I was lucky enough to win the ticket lottery and got a great seat for cheap. Shout out to my friend and con buddy Amber for helping me figure that whole thing out. I'm not used to the lottery system. The thing is though, I had heard mixed things about the stage adaptation before going in. Some loved it, some hated it, some were just kind of lukewarm about it. There wasn't really a majority consensus among audiences. But now having seen it myself, with the memory of smiling and practically bouncing along to Back in Time on my way back to the hotel that night, I want to talk a bit about what it's like to experience the Back to the Future musical and how it reflects this somewhat recent trend. It's no secret that in the last generation or so, Broadway has been flooded by movie to stage adaptations, musicals based on a popular film or series, or IP musicals if you want to use the more encompassing yet somewhat derogatory term for them, at least in my eyes. These things are kind of the bane of a hardcore theater fan's existence, and on some level, I get it. Broadway is small enough as it is, and having original stories conceived and crafted for theater, trying to fight for a chance against these big musicals based on already well-known properties that are easier to drive tourists into, it's frustrating. But since my list of favorite stage musicals looks like this, you can see how agreeing with that might make me look a bit like a hypocrite. And besides, if you've seen enough of these type of musicals, you know that there is some diversity within them. Most importantly for the topic of this video, how they tackle retelling the story in this new medium. There are 2 types of movie to stage adaptations. The kind that changes very little, more or less putting the same story right on the stage with songs inserted every once in a while, or the kind that takes the basic premise of the popular IP and twist, expand, or reimagine it using the new opportunities given to them with theater. The latter approach is usually the one that's more acclaimed or well received, usually, but Back to the Future falls very much into the former category. This is, in every way that matters, the exact same story as the 1985 film, with some changes made to accommodate for telling this elaborate sci-fi story on a Broadway stage, and to update certain things for 2020's audience. The biggest one I noticed is that when Doc is killed before Marty goes back in time, it's due to radiation poisoning caused by the plutonium, and not by, yeah, that one was definitely for the best. However, if you are a Back to the Future fan, this is where the musical is at an advantage and is enhanced as an experience. If someone were to ask me what I think makes movie to stage adaptations generally appealing, well, I'd say it's the same thing that makes going to see the original film on the big screen so fun: the communal experience. If a stage adaptation is faithful enough, you're getting to see this story you love so much performed and recreated right in front of you, with a crowd of hundreds of people who are probably just excited to be there as you are. I just wait in anticipation to see how they're going to tackle certain scenes. What it's going to be like when the DeLorean rolls in, how the heck they're going to incorporate the clock tower, or how fun it's going to be to hear Johnny Be Good performed live. Spoiler alert, it's very fun. And because it's a whole new medium, it doesn't have the same baggage to it as, say, a film remake would. The new creative challenges and opportunities that come with recreating all these iconic moments on stage for an audience who can react to these settings and scenarios in real time makes for a more authentic and on some level ambitious experience. This is something Brendan and I discussed when we talked about the Young Frankenstein musical over on his channel. It can be intimidating to take on such a beloved story, trying to recreate something most people sitting there probably know by heart, but I think there's something about the novelty of seeing those well-known moments performed right in front of you that is very fun and appealing. Anticipating the big moments from the film and seeing what they'll do with them now that they have to be put on stage stage as realistically as they can. Some of my favorite moments watching Back to the Future the musical were getting to those moments and sharing the reactions with the rest of the audience. The burst of applause after George punches Biff's lights out, the slight laugh of anticipation when Marty plugs into the amplifier that you know is going to overload, or when Doc pulls out the thought reading helmet. The absolute wonder of the projection work and set pieces recreating these cinematic moments on such a small yet grand scale. Watching the car fly at the end just like in the movie, but it's amazing for entirely different reasons. It's this odd, paradoxical reaction of it being those exact same moments, but new and different at the same time. And if it's done well, it can tap into those same emotions you might have felt watching the film for the first time, which is especially true in this case because Alan Silvestri, who wrote the score for the film trilogy, if you somehow didn't know, composed the score for the stage version as well, which means that a lot of the music cues are the same during pivotal moments, and yes, it's even better from a live Broadway orchestra. To me, there's just something about the new spark of life given to a classic story by telling it live on stage, reimagined but still being close enough to reignite that flame that might have dwindled somewhat after seeing those moments over and over again in the film, that makes the experience of this particular kind of adaptation feel special. As fun as that is though, it could still be seen as a novelty, an attraction that's impressive but ultimately disposable. Is there a benefit to turning a movie, especially a movie like Back to the Future, into a musical beyond that? Well, I didn't think so going in, but turns out, yeah. Musical versions tend to be longer than their movie counterparts, meaning there's more time to spend with already beloved characters, enhanced with the inclusion of musical numbers that can center on certain moments or characters. This doesn't always lead to success, your mileage may vary on how well this translates, but keeping it focused on Back to the Future, there is some interesting new insight into these characters and their setting. A more anecdotal example is the song Cake, which is the introduction to Hill Valley in 1955. It's pretty amusing to compare the 1980s version of 1955, which is more clean and nostalgic and only mildly problematic, to the 50s through a 2020s lens, where the nostalgia is gone and it's all over-enthusiastic misinformation about fossil fuels and cigarettes. You superlative gasoline. While characters like George, Lorraine, and Biff are virtually identical to their movie counterparts, there is some more insight into the minds of Marty and Doc. Not a lot, but enough to make certain songs have more weight to them and hear more of their inner thoughts, doubts, and hopes that you might have had to read between the lines for in the original film. There's more of a focus on Marty's uncertainty about his own future, not wanting to end up like his parents, but being too scared to be more ambitious. An obstacle that gets more complicated with this journey into the past and how he either might not get back or won't have anything to return to. Captured best in the reprise of songs he sang more optimistically in the 80s, performed right before the Enchantment Under the Sea dance when things are at their most precarious. But these worries are something he gets past as he helps his parents get together. A lot of Doc's time on stage is spent being eccentric and starry-eyed, and it's great. That's what's so fun about Dr. Emmett Brown. There's even a fun addition seeing him be really enthusiastic about what the future will look like and how excited he gets at one day being able to travel there. On a purely constructive level, you could have cut the song 21st Century and lost nothing story-wise. It is pure fluff. But I think it plays into the imaginative future side of Emmett that's pretty endearing in his younger self. But what really took me by surprise was the song For the Dreamers. When Marty expresses his doubts, Doc opens up about his own insecurities, how he's been mocked and misunderstood for his scientific ambition, that no one else gets it. But he keeps going because he wants to make that brighter future possible, even if he's the only one who can see it.
So this one's for the dreamers who live on inspiration, go as far as they can take it, even if they don't quite make it.
It's a really insightful moment for Doc as a character, a really sentimental moment between him and Marty, and the people behind this clearly realize it was the best new song in the show because they have Roger Barr perform it literally any chance they get when they can't drag the car out. And I'm good with that. I wouldn't say none of this was in the original trilogy. Back to the Future doesn't have a heavy emphasis on complicated character arcs or deeper themes, but they had struggles to overcome inside and out like in any good story. But as a musical, those traits that make these characters so great and their stories so memorable are forced into the spotlight to be poured out in the biggest voices possible to anyone listening. This to me is the mark of how to succeed in turning a movie into a musical. If including the songs can enhance what was already there, or make it reach new heights it hadn't before, you've done your job well. Back to the Future the musical doesn't have the strongest soundtrack out there, I will admit. The score is brilliant, of course, because it's Alan Silvestri, but some of the song choices are a bit odd, and the lyrics can be kind of pedestrian at times. And for a story about time travel, I think they should use way more reprises than they do. However, I'd say when all is said and done, it does succeed in enhancing what was already there into a new, satisfying experience. Let me put it this way. If you were asked what the main theme of Back to the Future was, what would you say? Most people would probably point to this quote from the end of part 3.
Your future hasn't been written yet. No one's has. Your future is whatever you make it. So make it a good one.
And that is indeed the right response. However, when it comes to just the first movie, the movie most people know and this musical is adapting, I would phrase it as, the future doesn't happen until you make it happen. George, for example, grows up to be just as much of a pathetic pushover as he was as a teen because he never confronted his life choices to try and make them better, because he didn't think he could. But once he takes charge against those taking advantage of him, he gains affection and respect by being more brave and outgoing, which is where the bright future he and Lorraine, and by extension Marty, eventually get begins. The musical puts much more of an emphasis on the if you put your mind to it, you can accomplish anything advice from the film. While it has an important thread of ownership in the movie, it's only mentioned like 3 times and isn't heavily focused on. But the fun of adapting this into a musical is that themes have to be way more front and center because the characters sing all of their emotions.
I didn't see how I could do it until I put my mind to it.
Don't be confined to it if you put your mind to it.
Put your mind to it.
Put your mind to it and you can accomplish anything literally gets a whole song all its own, and I think it's used to really help drive the message of Back to the Future home. Time may go by no matter what, but the future doesn't happen until you make it happen. You can be a version of yourself you can be proud of, but only if you put your mind to it. Back to the Future the musical is an easy idea to scoff at, though personally I think we should have had more faith in the idea of stage adaptations the second they were able to successfully translate The Lion King to the stage, but I get it. This is a weird one. I honestly did not know what to expect going in. But as a hardcore fan of the original trilogy, I found this to be a delightful reenactment and reimagining of something I love so much. It was one of the highlights of my Broadway con weekend. The day after, they even hosted a panel at the con with some of the cast and crew of the show, and I got to ask a question on the panel and even met Doc himself, Roger Bart. The real ones know how huge that is for me. It was brief, but I'm still kind of reeling from it.
First off, I saw the show last night and it was a great experience. You guys are absolutely incredible. Keep it up, please. Thank you.
To me, it just represented a lot of what I think can be appealing about these stage adaptations. If you aren't familiar with Back to the Future, you can still go in and get pretty much the same events from the film and see what all the fuss is about. And if you are a fan of the original film, it's easy to draw comparisons to see how it measures up to a classic like Back to the Future, but I often find myself appreciating the effort and ambition of the transition to the stage, and if done well, the thought and care in representing the source material in their own way. Thanks for watching, everyone. Definitely let me know what you thought of Back to the Future the musical in the comments below. That's why the series is called Let's Talk About. And here's a little fun fact that I didn't find a place for in the script. There's actually a Doctor Who cameo in the stage adaptation. If you plan to go see the show, see if you can find it, and if you did find it, say where it is in the comments. I want to give a very special thanks to my patrons who help support my content, including Jinx Productions and Wait in the Wings. If you'd like to join these fine people in supporting my content while getting cool exclusive perks, you can check my Patreon page at the link in the description, as well as my other social media if you'd like to check out any of those. Thank you so much again for watching, and I will see you guys in the future.